This is the Poluce. Stop now. You've broken the law.
Cheshire Constabulary investigates its own corruption and finds it's completely innocent. AKA Cheshire Constabulary's laughable complaints procedure. So anybody who's seen this video, or any video that I've done before, knows one big question in my mind is, why are the police always allowed to investigate their own corruption? Because naturally, of course, any organisation, whether it even is corrupt or not, if it's asked to investigate its own corruption, chances are, given the chance to find itself completely innocent of any wrongdoing, it's going to go to whatever lengths it needs to, bend over backwards, stick its head up its own ass, just to come out with a resolution, covered in feces, just to come out with a resolution of, no, we were completely innocent, of course we are, you don't need to second question us, you don't need to doubt that. And yet the police, despite being probably one of the biggest institutions that I would say that we have on this planet, in this country, again, people that are the arbiters of authority, of law and order, they themselves should take meticulous procedures to make sure that their own corruption is actually thoroughly investigated. And the greatest way that they could do that would, of course, be to not allow themselves to investigate their own potential corruption. And yet they are handed that authority whilst being the ones who are also supposed to be responsible for laying down charges for any such corruption, or anybody breaking the law and what have you. But that is a boon that is granted to the police, and I suppose just not that many people ever question that. Simply for the fact that, of course, the majority of people, you don't want to get on the bad side of the police, because, I mean, people that could be responsible for arresting you and harassing you, while themselves they're supposed to be the people responsible for arresting people who could be arresting or harassing you or intimidating you. It's just, I mean, it's the reverse of a catch-22. And it is a very legitimate question that needs to be asked. And of course, in this case and many other cases where corrupt authority has been asked to investigate itself, it comes out and says, oh hey, guess what guys, we investigated our own corruption and found we're completely innocent of any wrongdoing. So for those of you who have seen my previous videos, know all of the things that Cheshire Constabulary did to me. Denying me the basic human right to water, lying to me about a legal representative being in the building, fabricating entries on custody records, lying about what happened in police interviews, denying me access to evidence, refusing to produce evidence to either the defence, my defence, the prosecution, the Crown Prosecution Service, because they're so afraid of what that evidence might actually show. It's absolutely ridiculous. And again, that is the tip of the proverbial iceberg, in this case with Cheshire Constabulary, deleting evidence before anybody aside from Cheshire Constabulary have ever had the chance to even see it. I could go on and on, believe me, I would say it's another video in its own right, but I've already done that video. So I finally got my official resolution from Cheshire Constabulary when they were dealing with my complaint. It took them about 3.5 months. Because of course they're very apt, they're very timely with the things that they do. Again, say somebody was murdered, or say there was corrupt authority, as you can tell from this 3.5 month wait I've had to endure. I was living in a tent, or tents in this case. I've had to switch to different ones because rainwater, again, more torrential downpours that we had, absolutely trashed 2 other tents that I had. So I'm now on lucky number 3. After I finally got in touch with the MP's office, and they contacted the IOPC on my behalf for a second time after I contacted them, to basically get the IOPC to get Cheshire Constabulary to get their fucking skates on, take off the red helmet and the drool cup, and get their fucking skates on for once. I finally received my official resolution regarding my complaint from Cheshire Constabulary, and it shouldn't take a genius to figure this one out. They found themselves completely innocent of any wrongdoing. I believe the exact term that they used was service acceptable or service satisfactory. And let me tell you, it was not satisfactory nor acceptable to me, because amongst this complaint we have, well, start right here actually. One of the officers that I complained about, that I had a fair few complaints that I lodged against, was actually handed my complaints to deal with and to review. So an officer that I complained about was handed my complaints against himself and against other officers to deal with. The definition of a conflict of interest. Somebody who I have complained about has been handed my complaint, who I've said this guy has abused his power, he is corrupt, has been handed my complaint to investigate himself and find out whether he did abuse his power or whether he is corrupt. And he found himself, he found his service acceptable. And just to clarify, this was the exact same officer who, when he called me to deal with my complaint, he was the third person to call me. This was the officer who didn't even know that there was a basic human right to water and had to ask me, a detainee, where does it say you're entitled to water? Where does it say that there's a basic human right to water? And of course, because I have studied these things so much, even in just the week until he'd called me, I know it's in the the notes of rights and entitlements compliant with the EU Directive 2012-13. Again, I could have dementia or Alzheimer's. That will be the last thing I say in this world. It is that ingrained in my head. But a Poluce officer himself had to ask me, where does it say you're entitled to water? Where does it say you're entitled to refreshments? This is also an officer who, despite a conversation that we had had while I was detained, has also put an entry in my custody record saying that I had said no to wanting to speak to a solicitor or to the legal defence service. Which again, that was one of the first things. He even admits later on, he contradicts himself. That was one of the very first things that I actually asked for, was to speak to the legal defence service and to speak to a solicitor. But then hours later, when he's come into my cell, he's then gone back and put an entry in my custody record saying, no, I never wanted to speak to a solicitor or the legal defence service. I was fine just how I was. This is also the same officer who condemned the use of the word dickhead by one of his own officers when they denied another detainee their basic human right to water and said, if you want water, you're going to ask nicely for it, dickhead. And he originally mistook that because he was talking over me for like 15 minutes straight, to the point where I'd say to an officer, you need to stop talking over me. Like, you're asking me questions, let me actually answer those questions. Yeah, he condemned the use of the word dickhead as being abusive language. And then I said to him, how ironic, officer, if you consider that abusive language, that was a direct quote. I am literally telling you what one of your other detainment facility officers said to another detainee. And he realised the mistake he had made at that point and just slammed the phone down and hung it up, because he realised just he had really put himself in a hole there. And never contacted me again, didn't contact me at all. And I will just say, for the future reference, this same officer who's supposed to be investigating himself and his colleagues for corruption, as we will come to later on, also just can't happen to find CCTV of certain things, despite the fact that he has claimed that he has viewed the entirety of the CCTV of my arrest, on certain things where he hasn't been able to write them off or claim that it was something other than it was. He's just not been able to locate the CCTV, hours worth of CCTV, he's just not been able to locate. Coincidence after coincidence, Cheshire Constabulary. CC, coincidence after coincidence, Cheshire after Constabulary, Constabulary after Cheshire. So originally the complaint that I had lodged at that point, I hadn't actually received access to my custody record, because I lodged it about two days, I think it was, after I had been detained. So I had other things to do, because I was immediately homeless at that point. So I had to take care of a few other things, and then I got right onto the ball of lodging my complaint. And of course, only a certain amount of things had happened until that point, and by law, you are allowed to add to or amend your complaint once you have initially made it. However, that legal rights to add or amend my complaint was completely removed by this officer Skillen, badge number 3341. Really low down in the ranks, quite clearly. I mean, that's a participation award if I ever knew one. The right to add or amend to my complaint was absolutely removed by this little boy Skillen, hanging up the phone once he realised he had in fact condemned one of his own officers' language, when he is in the future, as you will see, going to try and use that against me. So he hung up this phone, and he has claimed in this official resolution letter that I've got when he's investigated his own corruption, said that it was told to me after I had called him a dickhead, is what he is claiming. But again, they won't provide the audio of that phone call to me because, again, they know that that's absolutely not the circumstances of how it happened. But they want that to be the case. And provided they never actually have to release the audio of those phone calls, because it could somehow prejudice a criminal investigation, they're allowed to say whatever they want. And of course, because they are the Poluce, up until this point, they are believed. So it was never confirmed to me that if, as he has written, it was confirmed, but it simply never was, that any further dealings with myself or my complaint would be done in writing, and would have to be done in writing. And the simple fact is, even if that had been put forward to me and I was aware of that, the fact is I have emailed Cheshire Constabulary countless times after I had lodged my first complaint, A, just chasing it up, and B, saying other things that had happened that I wish to add to my complaint, and also pointing out to them that I cannot add or amend to my complaint because there's nobody in contact with us, and simply for the fact that Cheshire Constabulary are also no longer handling complaints over the phone. I'm sure they say, I'm fairly certain, their little automated voice message with the girl with the gun to her head. And it's hilarious. She says, if you wish to address your complaint, you can email us at the email that's on the website. It's like they've not even written down the email to put this forward to this girl on a fucking napkin. So they aren't handling complaints over the phone anymore, I presume, because they had such an influx of complaints, simply for the fact that, again, they are the high school clique of bullies. Again, psychologically, of course, these positions always attract, positions of power tend to attract people that are thirsty to exert power over other people, simply for the fact that they are either physically, psychologically, mentally weak people, or depraved people. So let's just do what Skillen refused to do and actually do his job for him correctly, in a timely and efficient manner. Skillen first claims that my phone call regarding my complaint was on the 26th of June, I believe, and he's claiming that was the first contact that had ever been made toward me regarding my complaint. No, it wasn't, because if that was the case, Skillen, I wouldn't have audio logs of 2 previous calls that I had received from other officers. The first one claiming that he was my friend, that it just, we could solve this, we could just resolve this, it doesn't have to go any further. I told him the equivalent of, no, I was going to say fuck off, but I don't want anybody to ever misconstrue that I actually did say that to the officer. Again, I handled them with more respect than they A, handled me, and B, deserve. And then I received a second phone call at 20 to midnight, at which an officer told me that my complaints had been dealt with. Everybody involved in my complaint had been dealt with. I, of course, asked him how it had been dealt with. He wasn't able to tell me anything that had happened. He just reassured, oh no, it's been dealt with. Of course, I made it very clear to him it hasn't been dealt with until I've said it's been dealt with, nor until I actually know what's happened to the people that I've complained about. So in this, Skillen has basically he's gone through my custody record, as opposed to the CCTV that he claims he's viewed the entirety of it, though he later admits he absolutely hasn't, because some of it was missing, and some of it he just never even references, in lieu of instead using entries in my custody record that was submitted by people such as Skillen, who, again, we can provably show that they have lied about incidents that have happened to me, and lied about what they've said to me. But again, he's investigating his own corruption. I'm sure he's going to do due diligence on that part. So he admits in the resolution to my complaint that I was in fact denied water for over 3 hours, and he claims to have watched the entirety of the CCTV, and despite me saying that all of my requests in those 3 hours for water were denied because I didn't ask nicely enough, which again, those of you who know, your basic human rights don't come with the stipulation that you have to satiate an officer's ego to be granted those basic human rights. They are yours, you take them, you enjoy, my friend. So he never once mentions, nor catches, or maybe he did actually catch it, but he just chose never to mention the fact that I was told I would not be given my basic human right to water unless I asked nicely enough. And not a single one of my requests for that water were even logged in my custody record. And they especially didn't log the fact that they had denied those requests, because of course they're corrupt, they're not going to want to document their own corruption. When it turns out, when it was actually Skillen himself that had come into my cell, opened the door, walked in, completely exposed himself to any potential violence that he claims, I was denied access to a phone to speak to the legal defense service, because I was going to be violent and I would quote-unquote smash the phone up, he himself walked directly into my cell, completely exposing himself to any potential violent behaviour. And now on this point, on this conversation where Skillen actually came into my cell, instead of directly saying that he has viewed the CCTV of that conversation, he simply refers to his own entry in my custody record, his own bullshit entry, his own provably false entry in my custody record. So he never claims to have viewed the CCTV there, while having said at the very beginning he's viewed the entirety of the CCTV. Absolute lie, but that's Skillen. And again, there are provable fabrications, omissions in my custody record, alongside, again, to give you an example, in the police interview, what they have written about what happened during that interview, they stated that I was shown the body cam footage of my arrest during the police interview. They've written that in an official document, signed and everything, saying that's absolutely what happened. That didn't happen at all. That didn't happen at all. Because again, for those of you who have followed this channel for a short while will know, if they had shown me the body cam footage, they would have ended up showing me the arresting officer calling me an asshole, threatening to break personal property of mine, the most sacred religious icon to the Christian faith worldwide. And Skillen put in that entry in my custody record that he had also had to tell me, of course, oh no, you know, if you want water or something, there is a basic human right to that. You're absolutely entitled to that. All you have to do is ask. And alongside that, he also said that I said no to speaking to a solicitor or to the legal defense service. Yet once again, he even states further on in his resolution to my complaint that I had in fact asked to speak to a solicitor and to speak to legal defense service as soon as I got into the station, and as soon as I had, once again, after I had reread the notes of rights and entitlements compliant with the EU Directive 2012-13. So again, he's contradicting himself all over the place. And him saying that I have refused to speak to legal advice or to the legal defense service. Obviously, he doesn't mention in his resolution that it was because I was going to smash the phone up. He just straight up implies I never wanted to speak to them at all. Just didn't want to speak to them. Whilst also saying in the official resolution that that was the very first thing that I was asking for. So again, he's not even thinking about what he's doing in his own job. The MP's office will have finally got in touch with them and then have realised they can't brush me as a person off anymore. And they do have to actually take some action here. So instead, the action they took, of course, was to try and put out the fire that they had created and brush up the dust and throw it out the fucking door. But they don't realise I've been watching through the window the whole time. I've been waiting for this. And I knew it was going to happen. I wasn't expecting them to find themselves guilty of anything at all. So, I mean, the reason that I haven't actually done a video on this the past few days, A, I was busy, B, I was laughing so fucking hard at their attempt to just act as if they'd done everything by the book. But as we say, we'll just keep on going through this. He also uses saying that the reason that I refused to the reason I didn't speak to the legal defense service and said no to speaking to a solicitor, etc., was because, and this is the exact thing that he uses, says that I had refused to have anybody informed of my arrest. So the reason that I wasn't allowed to speak to the legal defense service, in his eyes, is justified by the fact that I didn't want any personal confidant, such as a friend or a family member, informed of my arrest. He uses that as defense for the reason that I wasn't allowed to speak to the legal defense service because I had said no to having a personal friend of mine informed of my arrest. I'm not 100% sure I have any personal friends that are in the legal defense service, hence why I wasn't asking to speak to a personal friend. I was asking to speak to the legal defense service. So however, he's had to do some mental gymnastics to justify that to himself. Thinking, again, for some reason, thinking that I would absolutely look at that and just take his word for it. Again, I can't imagine the way that they have handled so many other people on this. And I feel so bad for the people that get this and just throw their hands up and decide that they don't want any more to do with this. Like, you don't understand, Cheshire Constabulary. In a warped way, this is fun for me. I absolutely loathe the position that I'm in life right now. But seeing you guys act so stupidly, like, it reinforces any feeling I could ever have of just, like, you can't trust these people. They're just, not only they're just regular human people, they have been drawn to this position of power for majoritively one reason and one reason only, because they're sick fucking human beings. Instead of actually doing things in life where somebody else will be able to say, yeah, this person really did something for me. They helped me kick drugs. They helped me get a home when I was homeless. Like, they were the only person there for me in my hardest times. No, no, no. You want to be able to wear a little vest and just have the public presumed, at least in your head you presume, but you don't know, you don't understand how badly the actual perception of the police is to the public now. They just want the presumed faith and just that level of authority. Oh, we are beloved, I am powerful, I am right in everything. And again, little boy Skillen could prove all of this if he had actually, instead of using his own entry in my custody record, had actually just said that he had viewed the CCTV of the conversation. But again, he couldn't realistically do that, because then if I took it to a higher authority, to a higher body, they're going to be able to say, well, you clearly either didn't view the CCTV, or you viewed it and you absolutely lied about what happened in that conversation. So he's trying to play his cards very carefully here. And again, a corrupt police officer that you've made a complaint about, using his own provably fabricated entries in your custody record to prove that he is right and has done nothing wrong. Again, it should just tell you, like, there's no semblance of authority or justification in what these people are doing. They're absolutely just out there looking for their own, maintaining their own. Oh, and this is where Skillen has really, really, really exposed his ass to the world here. So when I was left out in the yard in the rain for an hour, until the agency that had been assigned to me for the day had closed, the solicitor agency, my legal representative, had closed for the day. Yes, they left me out in the yard in the rain for an hour, while my agency that was assigned to me had been calling and asking when they could speak to me. I was left out in the yard in the rain for an hour until my agency closed for the day, and therefore could no longer speak to me, and I would have to be given a duty solicitor at a time when Cheshire Constabulary decided, which I assume they also know which solicitors are on at which time. Fucking mosquito. But me being left out in the yard in the rain for an hour, wouldn't you know it, despite having claimed to have viewed the entirety of the CCTV footage of my detainment, little boy Skillen, all of a sudden, he just can't find it. He wasn't able to locate 2 CCTV cameras worth of an hour of CCTV footage. He just can't locate any of that. Oh, what a coincidence. What a coincidence, little boy Skillen. You would have thought you'd have tried a little harder to find these things, considering how hard you've bent over backwards trying to cover for yourself in the previous complaints. And then, however, instead of admitting, well, hey, you know what, we very clearly do have the time that he went out into the yard in the rain for an hour and then came back, and yes, it was actually an hour, if not more. He's instead gone the complete opposite way and says that, well, he can't be right, he mustn't have been wet, he mustn't have been upset or anything, simply for the fact that it isn't logged in my custody record that I then put in a complaint about being left in the yard in the rain for an hour when I was let back in, or I asked for a change of clothes, etc, etc. And again, as we know with the water thing, it's not as if they actually keep their custody records legitimately, as in, oh, he requested water, we denied him because he didn't ask nicely enough. They absolutely, even if I had said that, they absolutely could have just not decided to enter that because it looks bad on them. But the reason is, the genuine reason I didn't make it aware to them was because as I've been knocking for nearly an hour to get let back in, and they were looking at me, making little stupid gestures to me, clearly leave me outside in the yard of the rain for an hour, I knew that this wasn't going to be anything that was going to be treated fairly or acted upon appropriately. They were doing this kind of thing on purpose, again, to exert power, because to them, it's funny, they don't have any semblance of actual justice or authority or doing the right thing. They're here just to get their kicks and to make themselves feel good. And to be honest with you, I genuinely did mention it, seeing as the fact that I had already been denied access to water, they've then left me out in the yard in the rain for an hour. I was somewhat afraid that should I make another complaint of saying, why the fuck have you just left me outside in the yard in the rain for an hour, they would refuse me more water, they would stop giving me meals, who knows, they'd maybe even assault me. I mean, this is the police here. They're not putting any semblance of truth in the things that they're putting forward, and they are more than willing to break whatever law that they so choose and then cover for themselves. Assault, believe me, is not going to be beyond their remit. They would fucking love to do that to somebody who's complaining about them. But again, hey, as little boy Skillen is saying that he can justify everything that he's written because he's viewed it through the CCTV. Well, I'll tell you what, Skillen, all of a sudden you just can't locate this CCTV. for no reason. You just can't locate it. You didn't want to locate it because it would make you and your colleagues look bad. So how much more CCTV is it that you just weren't able to locate, you just weren't able to find? And again, how do you expect to say that anything that you're saying is true when you either can't locate CCTV, or when it came to your conversation with me in person, you just simply wouldn't locate the CCTV. You preferred to put your own corrupt entry forward as evidence to disprove your own corruption. Little boy Skillen also claims that I never asked for a Bible until 10 p.m. And there's no mention of it. There's no mention in my custody record that the Bible they handed me was torn, which again, they documented everything, every perceivable slight insult that I made toward the detainment staff while they were refusing me my basic human rights. They logged that in just, oh, with pride. Oh, such a bad person. Can you believe he said this? Can you believe he then said that? Can you believe that you denied a human being who was under your care water? That you lied to them about their legal advice being in the building? That you left them out in the yard in the rain for an hour and then pretended that you didn't? I don't know. It seems one of us is probably a bit worse off than the other, considering I was a detainee. You're supposed to be the better people in this situation. So they claim that I never asked for a Bible until about 10 p.m. And then, again, there's no documentation of the Bible that I was handed. I had to call the officer back and say, "Oi, you said to me when you handed this to me that if I destroy, I have to pay for it. But you yourself have handed me a destroyed, defiled religious text. Torn up, half the page is fucking torn out." It was absolutely atrocious. But again, hey, that was never put in my custody record, but you guys are being deadly honest with all of these things, right? Right, Cheshire Constabulary? He's also put down that the information officers that work with Cheshire Constabulary are refusing my subject access requests, such as me saying I want the footage of myself while detained, I want the body cam footage, I want the audio calls of complaints that I have made, I want all of that. They denied that to me because apparently the audio phone calls of me complaining, saying, hey, I was denied water, apparently that could prejudice a criminal investigation into me. Now, obviously, you try and figure that one out. Cheshire Constabulary, you try and figure that one out, because I asked for very clear clarification on how exactly could it prejudice a criminal investigation? These very specific parts, how could it prejudice a criminal investigation? And they just told me, oh, no, we're correct in what we're saying, we've interpreted the law correctly. They weren't able to actually give you that interpretation of the law because they quite frankly didn't have it, and they didn't know how to cover for themselves not having it or to make one up. But they just denied it anyway. So little boy Skillen said that they were absolutely right to refuse me the body cam footage, the audio phone calls of my complaints, blah, 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 because again, it could prejudice a criminal investigation, and that the process to go through that was through the CPIA, which, funnily enough, those of you who have seen the video I posted on the day I went to court, the process of disclosure through the CPIA, that should be handing me such things as the body-worn video, not the audio of the phone calls, I'm sure, because again, that has nothing to do with the criminal investigation, though Cheshire Constabulary like to pretend it does. They didn't even provide the body cam footage to us on the day we were going to trial. They hadn't even done the most basic process of disclosure on the day we were at trial. And it wasn't even just to the defense. They hadn't even given it to the Crown Prosecution Service, because again, they know if they hand over the entirety of the body cam footage, not just the selective chunks that Cheshire Constabulary have decided to sprinkle over this, hoping that everyone will just think it's sweet instead of just decorated shit that they have handed you, would know that it would show, the complete body cam footage would show the officer who arrested me breaking multiple laws. And of course, they don't want that being seen by anybody, nor released to the public, nor even seen by the courts, which is crazy. It's crazy. They're not even handing the evidence that would be used against me or against anybody else over to the people that need to use that evidence in court. They're refusing to do it. They won't do the most basic process of disclosure because they are scared of what they have done. And it's just, again, these are the people who are supposed to be responsible and held to account for representing law and order. They're being paid with public taxpayer money to do this. And yet they can't even abide by the most basic standards that they're supposed to while representing law and order. It's crazy. It's crazy. It's Cheshire Constabulary, that's what it is. So again, they directed me, oh, well, we've denied you all this stuff, rightfully so, because you have to go and get it through the CPIA, because, you know, that's where it all goes. Yet they themselves haven't supplied it to the CPIA, to the Crown Prosecution Service, to give to us, but they won't even provide it to the prosecution. So it's like, how can you rightfully deny me these things when even applying for them, even what you're supposed to be providing, you're still not even doing that, you're still not following through with it. Again, you can't understand how much that jeopardizes your ability to have a fair and open trial. And the simple fact is, as I said to my solicitor, they are trying to make this a war of attrition. They know that I'm homeless and that it's getting close to winter. However, they don't want to, again, they don't want to provide the evidence of the things that they have done. As I said, they even deleted one of the officer's body cam footage in its entirety, even though she went off and did something different during the time that I was arrested. And there are conflicting stories within the witness statements, which that body cam footage would very much be able to verify precisely how conflicting they were. But again, they deleted that on the defense's behalf because it wasn't relevant. It just wasn't relevant. Ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. Like, there's no sense, there's no semblance of a fair and open trial or justice when it comes to Cheshire Constabulary. They're just here to earn their paycheck and get their power trip. So little boy Skillen also just coincidentally couldn't find where another detainee, while being denied his basic human right to water, was called a dickhead by one of the detainment facility staff. And I would like to believe Skillen, I would like to believe that an officer of the law is telling the truth. Though, of course, we've already blown his pile of shit wide apart. But while he's just flatly, outright claiming that there was no other detainee was called a dickhead, they just weren't able to find it. No, they weren't able to find it, he's just claiming it didn't happen. Because, of course, because I'm applying for that and saying that it's a complaint lodged about something that happened to somebody else, it's going to be much harder for me as a human being to be able to find that CCTV footage of that happening to the other detainee, because it's nothing to do with me. So it wouldn't be involved in my court case or in any subject access request that I would apply for. However, I mean, hey, considering Skillen has already not been able to find CCTV, hours worth of CCTV, and also won't even refer to certain CCTV in lieu of using entries that he himself has made in my custody record, who's to say that comment wasn't in fact very audible and very clearly took place on some of the CCTV that was just missing, unable to be located, that Skillen just decided not to use in lieu of using his own fabricated entries and custody records. As you can see, there's no, and I genuinely would give them all the credit in the world if they were able to, because they did actually put one point about my complaint saying, oh, he complained that he was denied access to a pen and paper, which I even said at my very first video. Upon further reading, I discovered that, you know, they actually can deny you that in fear that you would harm or hurt another person. It's down to their discretion. So I dropped that, I let that go, because by the law, I understood, well, all right, fair play. They had every right to refuse me that. I get it. I'll work with that. I won't combat that. And I would love to still give them the same justification, because I absolutely would. Like, I would bite my tongue and say, hey, I was wrong on this. Fair play. Let's move on to my next point. If that was the case for anything that had come up in this official resolution to my complaint. Again, official resolution is so the incorrect term. They're brushing out the on fire, the dust from the fire that they've lit under their own asses. So this officer Skillen, despite being an officer who I lodged multiple complaints about, and again, where is their basic human right to water? You tell me, where is it? He been charged with investigating his own corruption. Why it was handed to him, I've no fucking clue. Again, probably because they think it's funny and they're hoping that I will just see this as right. They've clearly got no intention to actually deal with my complaint. If they're handing it over to this guy, I'm just going to back away into a corner. Again, you're doing it to the wrong person, Cheshire Constabulary. I understand most people won't have the mental energy or the mental acuity to deal with the kind of things that you throw at them, because there's no sense in what you're doing, and it's hard to make sense of it, because it's like trying to have a conversation with somebody who doesn't speak the same language. Like, I'm trying to speak lawfully, I'm trying to speak truthfully. Cheshire Constabulary don't even understand the definition of those words. They don't understand the definition of you're entitled to refreshments between meals. Apparently, according to Skillen, hey, those are his own words. Where does it say you're entitled to water? Where is there a basic human right to water? Well, Skillen, if you read the law book that you were supposed to be abiding by, you'd probably notice it's like the first one, if not the second, but I think it's the first. So he finally dealt with my my complaint on the 14th of September. Again, we're talking 3 months here, it's taken them to get to it, and I'm certain that wasn't because I've been chasing it. I'm certain that's because the MP's office has gotten onto them, and they've realised, oh, like, we can't actually have anything like this potentially being spoken about in Parliament, because it's going to look so bad, because we've done so much, so poorly, broken so many laws in dealing with just one person. We don't want that exposed, let alone the countless laws and abuses of power that we have made upon other people. And funnily enough, his official resolution to my complaint wasn't actually signed by a higher-up officer who was supposed to serve as quality assurance to ensure that Skillen did everything by the book. Clearly was never going to be signed by a quality assurance officer, because they'd look at that and just go, you just weren't able to locate CCTV? Okay, look again. Look again, little boy Skillen. Make sure you find it. But again, they're not concerned about that. He's also written his little psychological profile on me in my complaint, is that I couldn't engage in meaningful dialogue or discourse with myself. And I would like to say, he claimed during our 50-minute phone call, the one where he slammed the phone down once he realised that he had just said his own detainment officer's use of the word dickhead was abusive language. That mosquito. He's the fact that he's claiming that he couldn't engage in meaningful dialogue with me. When I finally get the audio of this, I'll happily release it, just so you know what little boy Skillen is doing with his position of power. Stating things to me, just saying them to me, finally asking me a question, let me get 3 words into it, and then immediately talking over me, immediately interrupting me, and I let that go on for longer than I should have done, until I finally clocked on, like, this guy, we're not here to have a conversation. He is here because he just wants to be respected, told he's right, get me off the phone. None of him and his corrupt colleagues will ever have to worry about the laws that they've broken again, and they can just continue doing it. And trying to read my own handwriting here. So couldn't engage in meaningful dialogue or discussion. I will say as well, despite him not even knowing the basic human rights, this is also the one that when he said to me, as he's written in my custody record, oh, I told the detainee that if he wants water, he's absolutely entitled to it. All you've got to do is ask. No, he didn't. He reiterated to me what the other detainment officers had said was, you're not going to get water unless you ask nicely enough. We're not giving you your basic human right to water unless you ask us nicely enough. And I let him say his piece, say his spiel, whatever he needed to do to satisfy his own ego. And then I said to him, well, actually, officer, and pulled up the sheet of the notes of rights and entitlement and said, the way that the law is written, he immediately goes, you are very argumentative. 5 words, 10 words at most into what I was saying, and I was very argumentative because I didn't get down on my hands and knees and just say, oh yes, thank you sir, thank you so much. This is that same guy, and this is how he thinks it's appropriate to deal with people that are supposed to be in his care. And again, cowered away from me, cowered away from a fucking phone call where he was being given more respect than he deserves the second that he realised he had said that one of his own detainment facility staff had used abusive language. When he realised he had just boxed himself in with his own stupidity, he cowered away. He cowered away with his high-vis vest between his legs, slammed that phone down, and just couldn't deal with me again. Daren't deal with me again. Whilst also claiming later on in this resolution, oh no, he was informed that any future communication would be done in writing because he used abusive language, because I used abusive language, as he's claiming. And again, he never said that. Never said that on the phone, never said that in an email. Why? Because he scurried away, he cowered away so quickly the second that he realised he had slipped up. The second that he realised he had been slipped up, that he had been best by his own stupidity, by his own hubris. I didn't even have to do anything. He did it to himself. So of course I can't go to the Independent Office of Police Conduct, the IOPC, because as I found out from when I had a phone call with them the other day, the only manner in which they can be involved is if the police, upon being asked to investigate their own corruption and handing it over to an officer who you have accused of being corrupt, they have to find themselves guilty of having done something wrong. Then you can hand your complaint over to the IOPC for them to decide how to deal with. Which again, I mean, I have to imagine that the IOPC offices are basically just them spending the majority of the working day deciding what takeaway they're going to get for lunch at this point. Because how are a corrupt authority ever going to come out and openly say, yes, we are corrupt, you busted us, you got us? They're willing to, let's just call a spade here. He wasn't unable to locate the CCTV of me being left out in the yard in the rain for an hour. He saw it and chose not to add it into his official resolution because he knew at that point it would be able to go to the IOPC. So he did everything within his power that he could. Everything that he's done, he's worked his way around it so poorly, contradicted himself on so many accounts, saying I hadn't asked for things when we were talking, even though then saying that those are the very first things I'd asked for when I was brought into the detainment facility. Again, how he thinks that nobody is going to actually be able to just give a basic read through of this steaming pile of garbage that he's handed over to people, handed over to me in this case, and not think that they'll be able to retain what was posted in the first sentence onto the next. He just thinks people are going to accept what he's saying. Because again, he's so used to that. He's so used to that. And if you were to say anything other than what he dictates to you, you are very argumentative. Doesn't matter about your basic human rights. Doesn't matter about law and order. Doesn't matter about any kind of justification in this world. If little boy Skillen and his colleagues say something is true and that you deserve something or that you did something, you absolutely did it. As I say, I can prove so many fucking lies, and I would happily disclose all of this evidence online. I don't care. My privacy is gone. Look, I never wanted to be doing YouTube videos for anything. I don't even like talking to most people. But this is how bad it's gotten. The fact that you've driven out the person who wanted to just be left alone to come out here and fight back against you. And at this point, because I've had to do that, I'm not going to be backing down at all, Skillen. You know that. I mean, you know that. Look at this, what you've given me. Look at this, what you've given me. So I can't take this to the IOPC. An additional point on that was just then, sorry, just to reiterate to you, they said in my police interview, I was shown the body cam footage of my arrest. No, I wasn't. And among countless many other things that they have lied about, omitted, or fabricated in my custody record, the second that it is provable, and again, if you had actually done the basic process of disclosure to the CPS, through the CPIA, and to the defense, we would have the audio of the interview and the entirety of the body cam footage, but the audio of the interview, police interview, where I could right this second prove to you that the body cam footage was not shown to me, and yet the police have put that down as the official factual account of what happened during that interview. How can you claim that anything you have written, put in a custody record, put in a police report is actually truthful? And I'm not going to use the word accurate, because accurate makes it sound like you could just through your own incompetence accidentally make a mistake. No, I'm saying truthful, because it's either true or it's a fucking lie. And quite frankly, not even quite frankly, truthfully, accurately, Cheshire Constabulary have proven time and time again, statistically here, that they're actually putting more lies, more fabrications on a person's custody record, which will be put forward to court, not the evidence, because again, they just haven't even begun that process of disclosure. How can you claim that any of this can be or actually should be used against anybody, whether that's in court or whether that's for justification of you saying that the way that you treated them or throwing their complaints to one side can actually be used to substantiate anything that you as a police officer are saying, when you as a police officer have been proven and can be proven and will be fucking proven to have lied, to have absolutely lied while on duty, in a manner as such where people can be put in jail for the things that you have lied about. Things that you may rely on in court that you don't say in a police interview, blah, blah, blah. But then it turns out, what if you just decide never to actually write that in the police report? Or what if you decide to write something else, or just completely make something else up and put it in the police report? They rely on it in court, but then in court, you're never able to back up the fact that the police have put a lie, because the police haven't even done the basic process of disclosure of evidence to the defense, or in my case, to the prosecution, because Cheshire Constabulary are so afraid of giving me that Pandora's box of their own corruption, because they know I'm not just handing my case over to my solicitor and just saying, You do it. You deal with it, sir. You're receiving legal aid on my behalf. You do the whole thing. My solicitor knows I show up with 2 notebooks, every sheet of paper I've ever received from the police, or from him, and they have notes all over the place, cross-referencing each other, lies listed down, contradictions in witness statements, everything. Evidence that has been said in the police witness statements, oh, I've submitted this as evidence, DW, whatever it is, but then that photograph never gets submitted. Or charges changing, Cheshire Constabulary changing what charges are, and then also saying, okay, well, you did this, and then when it finally comes to you going to court or receiving evidence 2 hours before you're due to put in your pleas, they then decide to dump a 47-page document on you of descriptions of the evidence, no photographs, descriptions of the evidence, and it turns out that what they were claiming you had done has completely changed. How are you supposed to put in a plea for something that you haven't even been able to fully comprehend or read until 2 hours before you're supposed to put in your pleas? The arbiters of law and authority. I mean, this mosquito is just everywhere. So I can't go to the IOPC, can't go to the Independent Office of Police Conduct, because to do that, Cheshire Constabulary have to investigate their own corruption and find themselves guilty of corruption. And as they've done, handing my complaint over to an officer that I complained about, he's clearly not going to find himself guilty of any corruption. And likewise, he's going to do everything within his power to make sure his fellow officers aren't found guilty of corruption, nor the laws that they have broken. I mean, how many times does a parent have to walk into somewhere, walk into their home, see their child with like the broken vase next to them, or all the chocolate wrappers open and empty next to them, and their face covered in chocolate, and just going, did you eat all the chocolate? Did you break that vase? And the kid just goes, no. And then how many times is the parent supposed to go, well, okay, all of the evidence proves that you actually did do these things, but I'm just going to take your word for it. You know better. You as the smarter person in that situation, no offense to the children, you know better. And in this situation, I can say, as somebody who is willing to put myself on the line like this, I'm willing to actually go through custody records and find out what is true, what is lawful, study the law so I know what is truthful, what is lawful. He also said in his little psychological evaluation of me, this gentleman, me, seems to have a problem with authority. So when I have submitted my complaints to a higher review board, which of course can't be the IOPC, it has to be Cheshire Constabulary's own review board. And again, I'm not holding out hope for them coming back and saying, oh no, okay, we reinvestigated it. We found all of the CCTV footage that Skillen couldn't locate. And we found out he was lying, he was doing this. I absolutely expect them to cover for themselves. For as long and as hard as they can. And then the next step after this will be a judicial procedure, which I'm fully expecting it to have to go that way. So when I submitted my request for a review of Skillen's resolution to my complaint, I specifically ended it by saying, oh, and if Skillen decides to make a psychological evaluation on me next time where he says that I seem to have a problem with authority, I would appreciate it if you would at least tell him to rephrase that to, I have a problem with corrupt authority, as is provable, as is defined by everything that Skillen has done within this very report that he himself has submitted, that he himself has been given to deal with, despite he himself being one of the officers that I am alleging a complaint against, that I am lodging a complaint against. I would very much appreciate it if, instead of spewing out all of these answers, and I specifically use the term from his forked tongue regurgitated with his curved spine, I would appreciate it if he would reword it as, I have a problem with corrupt authority, because I absolutely do. I absolutely do. If you are being paid with public taxpayer money, let's even forget right or wrong here. Let's pretend that you just have your own individual moral compass, as we all do. If you are being paid with public taxpayer money, you have a service to uphold. Doesn't matter what your personal opinions are. Doesn't matter what you might believe. Doesn't matter what you might think. The simple fact of the matter is, you have to conduct yourself in a manner that is appropriate, that it just is appropriate for the entirety of the public. For the entirety of the public. You give them their basic human rights. You don't lie about things that you could potentially be using to have them sent to jail. You certainly do the due process of things such as disclosure, or things of actually handling complaints that are made in a timely manner, and you especially don't hand them over to the people that are being complained about, for them to investigate their own corruption, only to find out that they themselves are not corrupt. This is the definition of corruption. This is Cheshire Constabulary down to a T. You accuse them of corruption, and you go through a custody record and you document everything that they have done, line by line, minute by minute, that they did when they were too busy documenting insults that they said you made against them, but couldn't document that you were asking for the basic human right to water. I genuinely don't even know how to wrap this up any better than I already have. A provable corrupt establishment is asked, not even asked, because the only thing that you can do is ask them to investigate their own corruption, because you have no other option, because they are supposed to be the ones who would be investigating corruption or crimes on any other day, in any other manner. You accuse them of corruption, and you can verify that without a shadow of a doubt, and they are asked to investigate their own corruption and find themselves not guilty. They find themselves not guilty. Are you supposed to be surprised? Are you supposed to take that as truth? Are you supposed to take that as honesty? 3 months. 3 months it took them. I've been living in a tent the entire time, and I've been able to do a more competent job from step one than Cheshire Constabulary have been able to do whilst having been trained for this, not for years. It's a 3-month course to become a Poluce, which is pretty abysmal in my eyes. I'm very much more preferable to those countries that say that you have to have at least a bachelor's degree before you can become a police officer. But no, Cheshire Constabulary, the henchmen, the grunt work of corrupt authority. And again, I can't help but laugh. I can't help but laugh at this, because what do you do? What else are you supposed to do? And it is funny. It is funny, the fact that this Mr. Skillen, badge number 3341, I guarantee you, walks around his house in front of his kids thinking, look at me, kids, I'm a big, respectable, responsible, hard guy. No, you better respect my authority. And the simple fact is, this is what he has to do for somebody like me, a guy who's living in a tent, and he's having to cower, he's having to make up so many things, lie so hard, just so his own ass doesn't get exposed to the world and can't be exposed to the world. They're running scared from a guy who's living in a tent, a guy who isn't even coming at them with a knife, with aggression. I am laughing at Cheshire Constabulary. I am laughing at Cheshire Constabulary. Because again, it's, what else are you supposed to do? This isn't a fair fight. This isn't a fair fight at all. As in, on my behalf, like, I can do this all day with Cheshire Constabulary. They can't. It takes them 3 months to even get this far, to not be able to locate CCTV footage, to not be able to disclose evidence to a court, because they are so afraid of the deeds that they have done being exposed to the public. And I'll rightfully so say, when I have submitted this review, and they've said, well, what could we do to resolve this? What would you want if we find that you are in the right? And my main gripe was, I want a public admission, not just to me, I want a public admission from Cheshire Constabulary saying, you know what, we actually have falsified custody records, we've lied about what happened in police interview, we have refused to disclose evidence to the court, even on the day when you're supposed to be going to trial, which means that no matter what, I still would have to be living in a tent for however many months until we had a new trial date. And in this case, it would be through winter. As I said, a war of attrition they're trying to start here. And I'll leave it at that. Oh, that didn't work. And Cheshire Constabulary, you do what you need to do, sweetheart. You do what you need to do, honey. It's no skin off my sack. I have so many other things to do. And believe me, it doesn't matter how many corrupt officials you throw at me thinking that will throw me off your trail. You're fucked with the wrong person. I'm not letting this go. I'm not letting this go. And you will, believe me on this, you will have to admit publicly to everyone, for them to know in the future, that you are willing to lie about police custody records. You are willing to lie about things that happened in police interviews, on police reports, that you will not give people the chance to have a fair and open trial, and most certainly that you are more than happy to deny people their basic human rights because you are fucking sociopaths who think you deserve more respect than you actually do. Fuck off, Cheshire Constabulary.